I'm Matt Wilhelmi. I'm the owner of Strategic Voyages Business Consultants. I'm also the author of Taboo Business Questions, What's Haunting Every Entrepreneur's Growth. And today I'm really excited because I'm joined by Alison White. Alison is a fractional VP of Sales and Marketing based out of Canada, but that's okay. She's really nice and she does a lot of work with companies in the United States. Her background and her specialty is working with SMBs, specifically on sales and sales leadership in the food manufacturing industries. And so, Alison, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Matt. Happy to be here.
Yeah. And so, Alison, you've got a really interesting background. You know, when we first met, you kind of talked a little bit about your time in the food packaging and food manufacturing industries, you know, dealing with some sales, leadership things and kind of developing those sales reps and probably leading, different sales initiatives. And so a lot of companies maybe would need, your kind of specialty. And so I'm wondering if we just for maybe a moment or two could spend some time kind of diving into one of your more recent experiences, which was with Amhill, North America and Stone Straw, and kind of what that company does and what they provide to the market.
Yeah, great. So Amhill and Stone are really food packaging companies, and they manufacture really great sustainable food packaging products for restaurants, retail. So really kind of in the grab and go takeout space. And the company is was growing leaps and bounds, and just a really great organization overall.
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of homework on it, and it does seem like a very highly competitive landscape. There's probably tons of companies that have similar products. You're talking about pinching pennies on product orders because the quantity is probably very, very high, right? You've got these enterprise accounts. You're probably not selling 10 straws to a startup. You're probably talking about orders of 10,000 straws or cups or whatever, the specific need is. But that brings about a different approach, right? When you're talking about enterprise sales.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's B2B sales. So it's really dealing with restaurant groups as opposed to independent restaurants. I mean, they're in there too. But it's really, going after that business that's going to bring value as much as the company brings value to them. A lot of the customers in that space are really looking for partnerships, and that's really important to develop those relationships with those customers that are going to bring a partnership to the organization and help us both grow in the best way possible.
Yeah, and so when you're talking about helping these restaurant groups, I would imagine that this is not a type of sales process where they don't know that they need these things. They're very aware that they're buying this from someone, and they do need somebody who gets their business, understands their timeline, probably gives them some sort of net terms, but doesn't delay orders, and so there's probably a number of different issues that the reps would come up with or be presented with, I should say. And so you, as the sales leader and the VP of sales, you're guiding these sales teams, right?
Right. It's really about coaching and developing the sales teams to achieve the success that we need. That any company needs a great sales team, and it extends beyond the sales team. Besides the sales team that works directly for the company, there's also a network of brokers and brokers that represent the products in the marketplace as well. So there's a large reach that goes beyond just the internal sales team.
Yeah. So when you're talking about leading a sales team, that's really kind of the driving force for the whole organization's revenue. And so, as a CFO who typically is working, with the CEO to talk about budgets and line items and things like that, I would probably, want to have a meeting or two with you at some point to kind of say, hey, like, how are we doing on sales and what kind of forecasts do we have? And I'm sure those are conversations you're not unfamiliar with. And so in your, 20 years plus history of being a sales executive, those conversations with CFOs, I would imagine, are part of kind of the job, right?
Absolutely. I always say that the VP of finance or the CFO is always your best friend when you're in sales. And not just, from a business perspective in terms of, the sale, it's about collaborating on ideas to bring that sale to fruition. A lot of times people in finance have really great ideas to help negotiate with a potential customer.
Wow. I wish you could shout that from the mountaintops. We have great ideas too. But I do think it's important because a lot of CFOs unfortunately get a bad rap because they come in as the cost-cutting CFO types. And I'm sure you've met these people, right? They want to slash prices or budgets rather, and the marketing budget's one of the ones they target, or maybe it's the putting pressure on the sales executive to get more sales. And I would love for there to be more beneficial relationships there where we're working as more of a partner instead of adversaries. And so that's encouraging to hear. But just to kind of set the framework for today, Alison, you and I connected about a case study that it sounded like was right in your wheelhouse. Being a sales leader and an executive sales leader in the food manufacturing, food packaging industry, this case study that I brought up seemed like a very obvious hand in glove fit. And so to give our viewers a little bit more detail of what I'm talking about, I worked with a specialty dessert manufacturer based out of Chicago. And I was brought in because they were having a sales problem. But I very quickly realized that it was a problem that I couldn't necessarily solve because I'm not a sales fixer. I'm a finance person. And so I saw the numbers. I saw they weren't going the right way. But you and I did talk about a couple of the things that were going on there. And so in this first episode, just kind of thinking about, how you would approach an organization that knows they've got some sales problems, what would be some of those first couple of questions that you'd want to know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the first thing that we want to do is, from a discovery perspective, is ask the kind of bigger questions before getting into the weeds. And those bigger questions are really around process and strategy, and as well as, what obstacles are in the way of the strategy, and what, if anything, have they tried that has not worked.
Yeah, and so to kind of dive in a little bit deeper here on this case study, this particular specialty dessert manufacturer, they did about $10 million in revenue. And so I would think that when we're talking about, you kind of leading a multiple billion-dollar organization and having a big sales team, this is a little bit different, but I would imagine that the same principles still apply, right? There's probably a way about figuring out what their issues are. And so I just wanted to kind of set the stage. So this specialty dessert manufacturer was based in Chicago. They did about $10 million in revenue. They had a sales team of about 8 reps. They were paid with a salary plus commission. And I think that that's really important just to, again, kind of lay the groundwork here to let you know what it is that where they're at in their business, so that then you can kind of maybe understand maybe what questions to ask and how to go about it. And so one of the things that we talked about was that they produced shorter runs. And so as a food manufacturer, there are probably some food manufacturing companies where they're doing, tons and tons of orders, the same thing, thousands and thousands of units. But this particular business, they produce about 5,000 pieces at a time. And so it's, in my mind, that's like a short run, right? It takes them a couple of days to do one order. and then they send it out and they kind of wait to do the next one. And so what would be your approach to kind of maybe unpacking some of the other issues that they're having on their sales team?
Well, first of all, with shorter runs, obviously you're not getting efficiencies in the operating part of the organization. So, I think I would want to understand what, first of all, what is a piece? So when you say 5,000 pieces, is that a slice of cake, or is it a cake? Or, how are the customers buying those pieces?
Yeah, that's a really great point. So when I say pieces, I'm not talking about a piece of a cake. Although sometimes maybe they could, but no, this is a full cake. I think you could probably divide it into 8 to 16 slices, depending on the size. But that was in their mind, that was a unit. Was
Right.
one.
Right. Okay. And then, my next question would be, is it fresh or is it frozen? So does it get shipped to the customer as a frozen cake, or is it fresh? And how long does it take the customer to consume that whole cake?
Yeah, those are good questions. So I'm not sure I know all of the answers there, but I do know that they were to ship them frozen. Part of the process when I talked to them and I toured their facility was seeing their cold storage warehouse, which is very, very cold. I think when I was talking to them, it was around Christmas time. And so it was even colder outside, but they froze the items. I think it was like -10 degrees inside their cold storage area, super cold. In terms of shipping it, they would ship it cold and frozen. But all of their clients were in the Chicago area. They didn't have the budgets and the margins to be able to afford to kind of ship it further than kind of it could stay frozen. And so that was just that was one of their issues. But the other question you had was a really good one. So how long would it take them to kind of go through their order, right? When would they be ready to kind of place their next order? The different people that they were selling into, it probably took a week. I don't think it was much longer than that. These were, they were selling into like high-end restaurants. And I think the pricing structure is important to kind of articulate here for a moment. They were selling their units for about $8 a unit. That allowed the restaurants to kind of have their, pricing structure so that they can make some money as well. And so, when they would sell to these different restaurants, they would kind of wait for the next order. There wasn't too much of like a follow-up after that.
Yeah. And I guess as you know, Matt, I have a lot of questions around this case study that you've presented. You talked about the customers. I guess, what is the lead time for those orders? What's the minimum order? And also importantly, how many different SKUs, how many different types of cakes does the company manufacture?
Yeah, all great questions. So I don't know the exact number of SKUs, but I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30. But they were constantly trying to figure out, which ones were their top sellers and which ones were their bottom sellers, and trying to kind of hone in on that so they weren't manufacturing stuff that they would throw away. So they were trying to figure that out. I don't know how great they were at it, but they definitely didn't want to have 1,000 SKUs. That would be a little bit harder for them to try and figure out.
Yeah. And also, I would love to know what the competitive landscape is in that space as well. So you talked about the Chicago market. Do they have a lot of that market share in that particular market, or is it very competitive?
Highly, highly competitive. There are a lot of bigger players that are able to do what this company does a lot more efficiently. This warehouse setup, when I toured the facility, I don't remember the exact square footage, but it was only kind of one room. They had 2 production areas. And so really they were only able to produce 2 units or 2 types of units at a time. And it would take, a considerable amount of time to kind of rearrange all of the different equipment. that it would take to produce these. And so if you can imagine a much larger facility that maybe is, the specialty piece of that larger business is much easier to kind of maneuver because they have, a lot more efficiencies there. They were competing with some really, really big players. It was very, very competitive.
Yeah. And are they selling direct to the customer, or is it going through a distribution channel?
Yeah, so they were able to negotiate a couple of brokerage relationships where they did have a food broker they were working with, but they found their margins weren't that awesome when the broker kind of took their piece of the pie, and so they were definitely more interested in working directly with the restaurants groups and the different organizations on that side of it. But you asked an interesting question just a second ago, and I'm not sure I answered it. It was about production time or lead time. And so when they would get an order, I don't know what the industry average is. Maybe you can help educate me here, but it didn't seem like it was very much time. They would get an order on a Monday and they would expect delivery within a week. Like, it was very hand to mouth in terms of the product delivery, but then probably to nobody's surprise, their payment terms were so stretched out that they were just getting squeezed.
Yeah. I think it's pretty typical. A week is pretty typical for the industry. Sometimes it could be shorter, given that they are focused on that specific market. They're manufacturing in the market and they're shipping within that market. So I think it probably could be shorter given that circumstance. A week is, normally, for a company that's shipping across, many different distribution points throughout the region or the country.
So I'm just kind of thinking about your approach for kind of diagnosing their issues. And you kind of told me that, hey, you've got a kind of methodology that you've adapted, but basically you go from, understanding their process, kind of dialing into their strategy. And so do you feel like at this point you've got maybe a good handle on what their issues are, or did you have maybe some more questions you wanted to dive into?
Yeah, I have a lot more questions. In terms of, so we've talked about the customer. I kind of want to pivot to the salespeople and what is driving them or not driving them to get the repeat business, which is part of the issue that we're talking about. So in terms of the sales reps, do they have specific accounts that they're assigned, or specific areas of Chicago that they're assigned? Where do they get their leads? How do they get to these accounts? What's their process from lead generation to the actual first initial meeting for the customer?
Yeah, when I was talking to them about their business, I'm not sure I could give you like the full playbook for how everything works, but my observation was that there wasn't necessarily a demographic area for the sales reps. I think it was more of a, that's my relationship kind of attitude. And don't touch that one because like that's mine kind of thing. And I'm sure you've heard that before, right? In sales organizations. I hope that's not okay. Yeah, I didn't think that was like a new issue, but yeah, it seemed a little ad hoc, to be honest. I'm not really sure if they had a strategy beyond opening up the yellow pages, so to speak, and start calling. I'm not really sure what their strategy was.
Right. And who do they report to, Matt?
Yeah, so their structure was very simple. And so these 8 sales reps reported to the CEO. They didn't have anybody kind of leading the sales organization beyond that. But that CEO, as I'm sure you can imagine, was also dealing with finance because they didn't have a CFO. That's why they were talking to me. They also did not have like a production manager. I mean, they had a manager, but they didn't have like a executive production person. And so the CEO is responsible for sales. He also came up with new recipes. He also, from time to time, would have to talk to investors. He ran payroll. Busy guy.
Well, the role of a CEO is all of that. But if you could take out the sales organization part of that role, imagine how much more efficient that CEO could be in his role. The one thing that I have noticed with a lot of smaller companies is that the CEO is running the sales organization, and sales reps or account managers or whatever you want to call them need leadership, and they need constant leadership. It's not just a, check in every day. Here's what we're doing. How many accounts did you get? It's constant one-on-ones and all the things that go along with leadership. So I'm not surprised about what you're telling me. A lot of small companies, the CEO plays that sales leadership role, and there's not enough time to focus on it.
Yeah, that's probably one of the bigger issues that I noticed when I was talking to him. I think I had maybe a handful of meetings. I don't remember the exact number of times we met, but every time we met, he seemed extremely scattered and was very challenging to get him to focus on kind of any one topic. We'd be talking and he would answer text messages, or he would have to take a phone call here or there. People would walk into his office with a very urgent issue and then leave. Like it was very chaotic. And so I would imagine trying to lead a sales team, because it's not like you can just turn that off. But having that same environment for the sales team, get them to focus when you can't focus, I would guess is like probably not a good idea, right?
Right. And I am probably making an assumption that the CEO doesn't really have time to go out on sales calls with the reps and may not know really who the most valuable customers are and where to focus the energy.
Not from a boots on the ground perspective. He was very in tune with the numbers, believe it or not. He knew who would order what. He knew who was interested in which products because of the numbers. He would look at orders to really kind of understand the sales side of it. So I give him credit for that, but I don't think it really carried through to the communication to the sales team, because the sales team didn't see the time invested with boots on the ground to kind of really make those relationships,
Right. Yeah. Another question I have for you, Matt, is, is there a inside sales or customer service department that works with the sales reps?
I'm sure this isn't going to surprise you, but no, the sales reps were responsible for customer issues and, dealing with order delays, or they were having a lot on their plate.
Right. And I'm sure that they probably don't have a sophisticated system to do any kind of forecasting or follow up, to proactively identify needs of the customers.
It was very dependent upon how people liked their desserts. And if they liked their desserts, they would order more. And if they didn't, they would never hear from them again. And so there wasn't really a great forecasting tool. That was one of the things that I noticed on the finance side. There was no cash flow forecasting. There was no monthly budgets. There was not even a cost per serving that they had figured out. It was very rudimentary and quite shocking that they even got to 10 million in revenue, to be honest. But yeah, there wasn't some of these kind of foundational things that you'd probably expect to see. And so, Alison, I guess this kind of makes me kind of wonder, at least I'm hoping I'm not here all by myself thinking this, but, are these issues you've seen before, or are these issues that are like totally crazy and everybody else has everything figured out?
I think these issues are common with smaller organizations that are going through growing pains also. So I would say it's pretty common to, at that level of organization to be going through these kind of aches and pains that they're having.
Well, that's great, because that makes me feel like I'm talking to the right person. You've probably been there and done that maybe a while ago, because I would imagine, as you've progressed in your career, the stress of that kind of need, to have sales immediately and to have not a lot of the infrastructure in place is less appealing to somebody who's kind of been around, a billion-dollar business or things like that. So, when you're kind of thinking about, how maybe you could help them, I'm wondering if, you can maybe go in the way back machine to when you were helping and working in these smaller organizations. Because like I said, I think as a fractional VP of sales and marketing, you're probably getting a lot more opportunities to help some of those smaller companies. And so they probably have some of these same issues. They don't really have a good, solid sales leader in place. They maybe don't have some of the software in place that you'd be expecting. And so I'm sure we'll get into some of those solutions in a minute. But just to kind of recap where we're at here, we're talking with Alison White. She's a fractional VP of sales and marketing. She has deep experience in the food manufacturing and packaging industries. She often works as a trusted advisor for CEOs and other executives in the sales department. And we've just got done, kind of unpacking this case study a little bit to understand some of their issues. It's a food manufacturing company, specialty dessert manufacturing company based in Chicago. They do about $10 million in revenue. They have 8 sales reps. And what Alison just, articulately identified was some really kind of key issues. They're a smaller fish in a bigger pond. It's a very highly competitive landscape. Their sales reps are having a hard time getting repeat business. Maybe it's because of the lack of sales leadership. And it sounds like also a lack of having some of those tools in place, like forecasting and tracking, and maybe even accountability. And so I've been assured that these are not totally crazy issues. Alison's seen these before. And so I'm looking forward to solving these in our 3rd episode. But in our 2nd episode, what we're just getting into here, Alison, in just a minute, are some cautionary tales. And so you were nice enough to kind of tease a little bit of what you're going to, kind of talk about in this next episode. One of the cautionary tales was around the lost value of a sales rep and when there's sales rep turnover. And then the second cautionary tale you mentioned was, kind of taking legacy accounts for granted and the bottom line impact that has. And so I'm really excited, Alison, to kind of dive into those in our next episode. Thank you so much for your time here in this first episode.
Thank you, Matt.